Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to week 2 of phase 1 of team training. This week, we're going to be talking about the big picture. Last week, we went through a basic movement checklist and some things I wanted you to keep an eye out for with the repetitions and reserve scale. If you have not watched that video, I really recommend that you go back and watch that. If you don't have a basic grasp of the repetitions and reserve scale and how that works and how you should be applying it, the whole program is pretty much for naught. So go back and watch that if you haven't already. But for those of you who have, we're going to get into the big picture this week. The main purpose of this phase is to have you work up to some type of 1 rep max. It may not be 100% of what you're capable of, but it'll be something pretty close. And the purpose of that is to have some type of baseline that we can take progress measurements off of in the future. A lot of you guys think that your 1 rep max is at a certain place, but it's not. It's really common for me to have somebody say my 1 rep max on the squat is 225, and then we'll kind of go into the program with 225 in mind, and we'll take percentages based off that 1 rep max, and then come to find out a couple of days or a couple of weeks later you did squat 225 but it was 3 inches high, or your friend helped you get the weight up and you forgot about it, or maybe you did actually hit 225 with good form and good range of motion, but it was 6 months ago and you've only done 2 leg days since then. So we want to get a good feel for what you're capable of and what your peak strength level is right now. So in order to effectively do that, we start with something moderately heavy at 5 sets of 5, and then each week we're going to lower the reps as you increase the weight. For those of you who are younger or maybe beginners and you're able to recover from your workouts a little bit faster, you're probably going to be able to add 10 pounds each week. I wouldn't go more than that. For those of you guys who are a little bit more advanced, maybe you're a little bit older or your recovery is not that great, just add 5 pounds a week. You really don't need to do more than that. And now that you've had week 1 to kind of play with the weight and maybe add a little bit too much weight, take some weight off the bar and get into whatever your intensity sweet spot is, this week you should have a pretty good idea of what you're doing. There shouldn't be a whole lot of experimenting going on. For some of you guys, you'll be able to keep the repetitions at 5 sets of 5. For some of you, you may need to lower the reps in order to increase the weight by 5 or 10 pounds. Either way is fine. Just go according to feel and always let that 3 repetitions in reserve dictate how much weight you're using. And we're going to keep that nice submaximal intensity level as we increase the weight so that we can ride the momentum of your training into week 5 and 6, where the repetitions in reserves will lower to 2 and 1 as the weight gets more intense. So week 1 through 4, we're not pushing it that hard. We're just trying to build, make sure we're using a full range of motion, get into the groove of training. And then week 5 and 6, we'll press the gas a little bit harder and push you a little bit closer to failure when we test that 1 rep max. This is kind of a general look at what the next 18 weeks is going to look like. Technically, it's a little bit more than 18 weeks because we have a deload week in between each phase, but phase 1, which we just talked about, is to establish your baseline of strength, get a good idea of what your 1 rep max is, and then we'll deload. And then once we move to phase 2, there's going to be a lot more volume, a lot more reps, a lot more sets, more accessory exercises, and there's not going to be nearly as much weight on the bar. And the reason we're doing that is because that higher volume and lower intensity will allow you to increase your muscle mass, your work capacity, your general strength, and it's also going to give you more time under tension so that you can refine the skill of squatting, benching, and deadlifting through just more repetitions, more opportunities to practice. At the end of that 6-week phase, we will deload and transition into phase 3, which will be a retest phase where we're really pushing the heavy weights again, and we're going to try and beat the numbers that you lifted in phase 1. And we're going to accomplish that by lowering the volume significantly from what you were doing in phase 2 and doing 5 sets of 2 and eventually transitioning into 5 sets of 1. And the thinking behind this is that when we switch to those low rep sets where we're lifting a lot heavier, we're taking all that muscle mass and all that work capacity that you built in phase 2, and we're teaching it to produce more force. We're taking that muscle mass and demanding that it fire all at the same time, quicker and with more intensity, so that we can take all that strength potential and turn it into actual realized strength once we reach the end of that 6-week peak phase. And this is probably one of the main differences between what I'm offering you and what you might find on another tactical fitness page, is this long-term structuring that sets you up for success. Because if you go and let's say you do get a good 12-week program at a fitness page, and best case scenario, let's say you can run that program 2, maybe even 3 times. Each time you see some results, each time you see a little progress, it's really isolated and doesn't give you something to build on in the long term. It may give you good results for 12 weeks or maybe even 6 months, but what are you going to do 6 months, a year, 3 years from now? Because ultimately, for those of you who are more advanced athletes, you need time, you need years to be able to make real progress and get yourself to those elite levels of fitness. And for a lot of you guys who are beginners, you need a lot of time to build momentum so that you can start to do things the right way and kind of dig yourself out of the hole of being weak, being out of shape, and that sort of thing. And so with the team training phasic structure, you get a long-term plan where these phases are not just randomly implemented and kind of thrown together haphazard. There's actually a long-term sports performance plan where you're peaking at certain times, building at other times, and each phase is building off of the qualities that you've worked on in the previous phase. And with this phasic structuring, there's a really nice balance between specificity and variation. We know if you want to get good at something, say deadlifting and running, you have to do that consistently and for a long period of time so that you can put in the requisite amount of work to get better at it. But we also don't want to do the same things all the time forever, because one, that limits us as athletes and we want to ultimately kind of be a jack of all trades, but psychologically and physically it gets very stale and can lead to some forms of burnout. And so the program is always going to focus around bread and butter strength and conditioning movements like hip hinging, squatting, pressing, heavy upper body pulling, and some form of running, but we're going to use variations of those heavy strength training movements and different types of running, in addition to just a lot of different accessories that we're going to be able to draw from in order to make you as well-rounded and as physically prepared as possible, while still cycling back frequently enough to stuff you've done before so that we know for sure that you're making progress, because we're measuring what you're doing now based off of what you've done in the past. So even though I'm constantly talking about not rushing the process and making sure we focus on movement quality and not going too close to failure, if you guys have the patience to stick with this program for 3 of the 6-week phases, you're going to eventually come back around. You're going to retest those PRs that you did when you first started, and I know you're going to be really pleased with the results. So if you've listened to the video for this long and still have no idea what I'm referring to, team training is available. The actual programming that is following all the principles that I'm talking about is available on trainheroic.com. There's a link down in the description. Go and click on that link. You get a 7-day free trial. After that, it's $25 a month. Cancel anytime. And let's be honest, even if it's the worst program in the world or you don't even end up using it, it's $25 that you were going to spend on Pizza Hut anyway. So if you stuck around this long for the video, you may as well go and sign up now. Thanks, guys. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment section below, and I will see you next week.